The usually composed morning atmosphere of BBC Breakfast was anything but calm when Conservative MP Chris Philp appeared on air to challenge the government's record on illegal migration. What began as a standard segment quickly escalated into a highly charged exchange that left viewers stunned and commentators divided. The tension reached its peak when Philp directly confronted presenter Naga Munchetty over what he described as a clear ideological slant in the way the BBC covered the migrant issue. Philp, who had just returned from a visit to the English Channel where he witnessed multiple migrant boats arriving from France, came into the studio armed with first-hand accounts and a sharpened criticism of Labour's newly implemented migrant return agreement. Instead of a polite policy discussion, the live broadcast descended into a full-blown clash over media impartiality, government failures, and the deeper implications of the new migrant deal.
The whole thing was completely shambolic, and there was no sign whatsoever of the government's supposed New Deal having any effect whatsoever.
Do you think it's reasonable to expect there to be an immediate deterrent effect just hours into the agreement? Just hours into the agreement?
Well, I mean, the point about a deterrent is that people know that if they try and cross, they're going to get returned, and obviously this agreement is not going to do that because...
Well, no, that's not my question. It was a few hours into the agreement. I think came into force at midnight. I don't know what time you were out to sea, but do you think that deterrent would have been immediate?
Well, I mean, that's how deterrents work, because people know they're going to get returned.
No,
I think it is reasonable.
You see evidence of a plan in place, and then that is then put forward or understood by others, and that's how a deterrent works. It doesn't work straight away.
Well, I think the point of it, I think it should work straight away because
the number.
Anyway.
The debate didn't stay confined to studio walls. Within moments of airing, clips of the exchange began circulating across social media platforms. Supporters praised Philp for confronting what they viewed as entrenched bias at the BBC. Critics, meanwhile, accused him of bullying a presenter doing her job. But beneath the noise was a much larger issue now exposed to millions. A growing disillusionment with how migration policy is being debated, reported and enforced in modern Britain. Philp's appearance on the programme came less than a day after his visit to the Kent coastline, where he personally observed the ongoing flow of migrants crossing the channel in small boats. The trip, which he described as urgent and necessary, was meant to highlight the continued failure of Britain's border enforcement, even under the backdrop of Labour's much publicised one-out, one-in migrant exchange deal with France. During his visit, Philp reportedly witnessed multiple overcrowded dinghies arriving within a short time frame, each packed with individuals making the journey from northern France. These observations, he argued, proved that Labour's newly minted returns agreement had already failed to deliver any meaningful deterrent. According to Philp, if the goal of the policy was to stem the tide of crossings, then its implementation had fallen flat from day one.
The only numbers that have been reported on are 50 a week, which amounts to 6% of people crossing the channel. Now, if 6% get returned and 94% get to stay, that is no deterrent at all, is it? If 94% can stay. So, I mean, common sense tells you that won't work.
We're 2 days in now, but tell me then, because you and I, we've spoken over the years when you were in government, the Conservatives were in government, and now. When the Rwanda policy was proposed, the Conservative government said that would be a deterrent. It wasn't put in place, but it was a deterrent already, just the proposal. How much of a deterrent was it the day after it was proposed?
Well, it's not about proposing a deal, it's about the deal coming into force.
But you said it would be a deterrent.
Let me finish the point. And as you've already acknowledged, the Rwanda scheme never actually came into force. It was never actually in effect. Labour's rubbish deal.
The BBC segment began with Munchetty referencing that trip, perhaps expecting a straightforward policy explanation. But what followed was a collision of perspectives. One grounded in lived observation, the other in cautious journalistic framing. Philp's frustration boiled over when he felt the facts he had witnessed were being reframed to soften the failure of the policy. For him, it was no longer about numbers or legislation, it was about a media institution, in his view, shielding political narratives at the expense of transparency. The result was a moment that captured the growing friction between politicians demanding urgency and broadcasters navigating neutrality in a polarised environment. As the segment continued, the tone shifted from disagreement to outright confrontation. Philp, visibly agitated, challenged Munchetty's line of questioning, which he believed minimised the gravity of the situation at the channel. Rather than focusing solely on policy outcomes, the discussion veered into a deeper debate over institutional trust and media responsibility. Philp argued that if journalists present the facts through a particular ideological lens, the public ends up with a distorted picture of what's actually happening. He accused the BBC of failing to hold the Labour government accountable for a plan that, according to him, was already collapsing under its own promises. The deal, he pointed out, only aimed to return a fraction of those arriving, with numbers so small they hardly scratched the surface of the wider crisis. Munchetty, pushing back, insisted on scrutinising the timing and potential impact of the deal, suggesting it was premature to declare it ineffective just hours after its implementation. But that argument did little to calm the exchange. For Philp, the issue wasn't patience, it was principle. If only 6% of migrants were ever going to be returned, the policy wasn't a deterrent, it was a headline. And for a public increasingly fed up with government promises and media narratives, this exchange wasn't about who won the argument. It was about exposing a deeper frustration that's been simmering beneath the surface. Once the cameras stopped rolling, the confrontation didn't fade quietly into the day's news cycle. Clips of the exchange flooded social media, drawing sharp lines between those who applauded Philp's boldness and others who accused him of undermining journalistic scrutiny. The broadcast had, in essence, become a lightning rod for a much broader cultural divide, one where trust in traditional media and the credibility of political promises are both under fire. Viewers on one side praised Philp for confronting what they perceived as institutional bias, claiming that too many media outlets, including the BBC, sidestep uncomfortable truths about immigration. To them, this wasn't an isolated clash, it was a long overdue reckoning. On the other side, critics saw a politician attacking a journalist simply for holding him to account, questioning whether such a combative stance threatened the very principle of a free and independent press. But behind the noise of online reaction was a central truth that couldn't be ignored. Migration, especially via illegal channel crossings, has become more than a political talking point, is now a national flashpoint. Fueled by frustration, fear, and the sense that policy after policy keeps falling short. The argument between Philp and Munchetty may have lit the spark, but the fire was already there, burning through communities, headlines, and now live television. While the Philp-Munchetty clash dominated morning headlines, the day took an even sharper turn when Reform UK MP Sarah Pochin called for an emergency recall of Parliament. Her demand came with a pointed declaration that Britain's migrant crisis had reached a level she described as a national emergency.
They have no plan for Scotland's future.
Sarah Pochin. Yeah.
Given the Prime Minister's desire to strengthen strategic alignment with our European neighbours, will he, in the interests of public safety, follow the lead of France, Denmark, Belgium and others and ban the burqa?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Can I welcome her to her place? But I'm not going to follow her down that line. But now she is here and safely in her place, perhaps she could tell her new party leader that his latest plan to bet £80 billion of unfunded tax cuts, with no idea how he's going to pay for it, is Liz Truss all over again. Although, considering I think she was a Conservative member when Liz Truss was leader, she probably won't.
Dr. Scott Arthur.
Pochin's intervention wasn't subtle. She directly attacked the new migrant exchange deal between Britain and France, dismissing it as a meaningless arrangement that failed to protect the country's borders. Under the current agreement, small boat arrivals are exchanged for asylum seekers with UK ties, but the actual impact of this policy remains murky. For Pochin, it was nothing more than political theatre, packaged as progress. But her concerns went beyond policy logistics. She argued that by allowing migrants to enter the UK illegally and still be housed and supported by local councils, the government was effectively forcing those councils to participate in what she called unlawful behaviour. Citing the Immigration Act of 1971, she questioned how a state could claim to uphold the law while accommodating people who, by definition, had broken it. Pochin's words added fuel to an already volatile debate. Her legal framing and calls for accountability struck a chord with those who believe the crisis is not only humanitarian, but constitutional. In doing so, she pushed the conversation from policy failure into the territory of legality and civic responsibility, raising the stakes even higher.
What a day in politics, because Reform MP for Runcorn Sarah Pochin drew gasps of astonishment at PMQs today when she implored Keir Starmer to ban the burqa for public safety reasons. Take a listen.
Given the Prime Minister's
Pochin didn't stop at legal arguments. She turned her attention to an even more sensitive subject: the lack of official data on sexual offences committed by asylum seekers. In her view, the government's failure to track and publish these statistics wasn't just an oversight. It was a betrayal of public trust, particularly toward women and girls across the country. Re-referencing internal government figures, Pochin claimed migrants were statistically more likely to commit sexual assault after arriving in the UK. She painted a grim picture of families afraid to let their children play outside, with mothers protesting quietly in local communities over a fear that rarely makes it into national headlines. For her, these anxieties weren't irrational. They were based on a clear lack of transparency from a government she believes is more interested in protecting political narratives than protecting the public. The absence of data has become its own controversy. Without clear figures, speculation fills the gap, and that vacuum feeds anger. Pochin used that silence as a weapon, arguing that the refusal to release information suggested the government had something to hide. She questioned who exactly was being allowed into the country and whether basic vetting was taking place. Were the arrivals vetted for criminal records? Were any flagged as national security risks? In Pochin's view, those questions remain unanswered. And that uncertainty is what fuels the rising backlash in communities across Britain. By the end of the day, Pochin's remarks had taken the migrant debate to a new level, one no longer limited to political talking points or party lines. Her speech blended fear, frustration, and legal concern into a single narrative that many felt had been building silently for months. It wasn't only about boats arriving in Dover or deals signed in Paris. It was about whether the public still trusted those in power to tell them the truth and protect their communities. Calls to recall Parliament during summer recess are rare, but Pochin's demand signalled a belief that the government's response to illegal migration could no longer wait for autumn. She accused ministers of enabling law-breaking, failing to protect women and children, and undermining both border control and local authority governance. Her statements didn't just challenge Labour's policies, they challenged the very foundations of how the migrant crisis has been managed across multiple administrations. With the migrant deal set to expire in 2026 and pressure mounting from all sides of the political spectrum, the window for meaningful change is narrowing. Communities across the country are no longer willing to wait. They want answers, clarity, and protection, something they feel has been missing for far too long. For critics of the current approach, Pochin's speech was more than a critique, it was a warning. One that echoed far beyond the Commons and landed directly in the living rooms of those who feel the crisis is no longer distant, it's personal. As the migrant crisis continues to dominate headlines, one thing is clear. This is no longer a debate confined to Westminster corridors or policy briefings. It has become a defining issue for the nation, reshaping how politicians, journalists, and everyday citizens engage with questions of law, safety, and national identity. The explosive exchange between Chris Philp and Naga Munchetty, followed by Sarah Pochin's stark demands and legal accusations, has intensified the scrutiny on both the Labour government and legacy media institutions. Critics argue that the public is being left in the dark while decisions are made behind closed doors, and the growing chorus of dissatisfaction is starting to echo across party lines. Philp's on-air confrontation exposed the limits of conventional political interview. Pochin's speech laid bare the cracks in the government's legal and moral framework. Together, they represent a shift, one where civility is giving way to confrontation, and where trust in long-standing institutions is eroding in real time. Whether Parliament will return early remains uncertain, but the pressure is building. With border enforcement under question, public safety concerns on the rise and media credibility now part of the battlefield, Britain's migrant crisis is no longer a slow-burning policy dilemma, it is a national reckoning, and it's far from over. And that wraps up today's report on one of the most explosive political moments of the year. From live studio clashes to emergency calls in Parliament, the migrant debate in Britain has reached boiling point, and the fallout is only just beginning. If you found this breakdown insightful, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more hard-hitting updates and deep dives into the stories that matter. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Has the media lost its neutrality, or are politicians using the crisis to deflect blame?